Um, Lincolnwood Together is a group of Lincolnwood residents that are committed to three things. We want to foster a community in Lincolnwood that is informed, engaged, and unified. We are committed to civic engagement. We want people, we don't take a stand, we don't have an opinion, we don't have a political slant. What we want is for people to be engaged with us and to be engaged in politics and be concerned about what's happening in our community. So one of our projects, our Starship project, is we have the Harisse Levitt Angel Fund. And I was going to ask Paula Tobin if you would talk to us a little bit about the fund. You have to unmute.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
The Harisse Angel Fund is named after Harisse Levitt, and a wonderful activist within our community. And it is in order, we are doing so and donating to it, and I hope you all will donate. I will put it into the chat. And we serve Lincolnwood residents in financial crisis. And we do so a number of ways, including paying utilities bills. We have given food cards and in various other manners through the Lincolnwood Police Social Worker. So I hope that if you have a moment that you will go to the chat. And here is the website. Take a moment to take a look, and I hope you will donate. It's for a wonderful cause. It's our neighbors serving our fellow neighbors. Thanks.
Thanks, Paula. So Sue, you had asked about the opportunity to share. During the course of the evening, the senator is going to do some, he's going to talk to us. I'm going to interview him. And then if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with him, there are a couple ways that you can do that. One is if you use the reactions button on your screen, and I'm going to put it on mine right now, the one that looks like applause, it looks like you're raising your hand. If you raise your hand, give us the opportunity to call on you. You can unmute and ask your question or make your comment directly. Some people prefer to do that through the chat, in which case you can either direct your comment to everybody and we'll see it and we'll read it to him. Or if you want to make a comment or have a question anonymously, you can direct your comment directly to Paula Tobin and she will read it and not identify you. Some people prefer to do that, anonymously, and we want to be sensitive to everybody. And speaking of being sensitive to everybody, one of the really cool things about Zoom, or one of the, I don't know, I'll frame it as a cool thing. It could be a bad thing, is that, everybody's a little tiny 1 inch by 1 inch picture on the screen. And while the senator is talking, he can't really necessarily see everybody's faces and see when you're nodding your head or see how you're reacting. And that's kind of, it makes it hard for public speaking when you don't have that feedback. It's like being on television. You don't know what's coming back at you. So I think it would be just really generous and loving if we used your reactions. When he says something that you like, put your thumbs up. You say something if he says something you love, put a heart. If you're really excited and celebrating what he did, give him a celebration, so that he has some interaction with us and there's some back and forth. People may still be coming, but I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our state senator, Ron Villivalam. He joined us when he was a candidate. Now he's here as state senator. He's got a beautiful bio, so bear with me, I'm going to read this to you. State Senator Ron Villivalam was born and raised on the northwest side of Chicago. He's a son of Indian immigrants. His parents came here in the 1970s. Though his father and mother were a civil engineer and a teacher in India, respectively, they had to work minimum wage jobs, go back to school, and work their way to more than 25 years each of public service. Senator Villivalam will always remember their struggles and middle-class values with which he was raised, as he, prior to entering the Illinois General Assembly, had spent the last 4 years advocating on behalf of home care for seniors and people with disabilities, child care for working families, and Medicaid for those in need. Prior to that, Senator Villivalam worked for U.S. Congressman Brad Schneider as outreach director. In this role, he was responsible for constituent communications on a variety of policy issues that ranged from application assistance for the Affordable Care Act to employment affairs coordination. Senator Villivalam is honored to be an effective, proactive, and progressive voice for the people of the 8th District. He has and will continue to be focused on issues such as improving DBE participation on transportation projects, income equality, reducing gun violence, providing equality education regardless of zip code, and advancing women's and LGBTQ rights. Additionally, he is incredibly proud to be the first Asian American elected to the Illinois State Senate, the first Indian American elected to the Illinois General Assembly. He is currently the chair of the Transportation Committee and Special Committee on Supplier Diversity. He also sits on the Illinois Senate Appropriations Committee, Education Committee, Labor Committee, Human Services Committee, Special Committee on Public Safety, Special Committee on Pension Investments, and the Subcommittee on Capital. Senator Villivalam lives with his wife Elizabeth and his adorable son Rohan. If you don't follow him on Facebook, you don't know what you're missing, in the North Mayfair neighborhood in the city of Chicago. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our state senator, Ron Villivalam. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
Wow.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Thank you so much for that kind introduction and for having me on. I apologize for being a few minutes late here. We were finishing up bath time at our household, and it is a process to say the least. And I also want to thank you, for rescheduling. I did really want to provide an update in May to you all. We originally planned this. I always appreciate and try to update folks while we're in session. I obviously believe in having these conversations after session. However, I always thought to myself, well, it's after session. We're finished, with the legislative work. We should be talking during session too, and so I do apologize for not being able to do that particular time, because I actually the Senate President called me into a meeting at 7 o'clock that evening, and so it's one of those situations where when you get called to the third floor, you go to the third floor, and so but it's great to have the opportunity to reschedule, and rest assured, we received thousands of emails and calls and text messages throughout the last 5 months as it relates to issues that we took up during the legislative session, and I was able to read all of them and understand where people are on the number of different issues. And Karen, I apologize. I know that there was a flyer, and I don't know if there's specific. Joey sent it to me a few times, but if it's okay, maybe I'll just go into, a little bit about the few issues that we tackled, and then really leave a lot more time for questions.
That would be fine. That's great.
Okay, perfect. So first and foremost, our number one, responsibility in Springfield is our budget situation, and we passed a balanced $42 billion, approximately $42 billion budget this session. We were able to utilize the American Rescue Plan dollars that I hear them in the background here, that came through from the federal government to do what it was intended to do, which is help us through this difficult time. First and foremost, what we did was we used, of that about approximately $8 billion, we used approximately $3 billion of it to pay off the loans that we took during the pandemic from the federal government. So we paid about $3 billion off. And then secondly, what we did was we used about $500 million of it to fund the vertical projects that we put towards as part of the Rebuild Illinois plan. And these vertical projects are investments in our community, ranging from potentially a new science building at NEIU to, foster STEM, learning, to other investments in community centers and nonprofits that, like, for example, in Skokie Turning Point, they need a new roof and it costs $300,000. And so what we did was we put it in the capital plan for them to get that roof. The original plan, however, called for the issuance of bonds to fund those projects. And as a result, only a few projects were able to fund every year. Well, what we said was, hey, there's this American Rescue Plan dollars. Let's use some of this funding to fund these projects and get them out the door faster because the need is now. And so that's part of what we did. And then we essentially shifted some of the ARPA dollars kind of to make sure we adhere to the federal guidelines by the Treasury to backfill some of our budget. And then we're able to use other dollars, other mechanisms to fill the remainder of our budget deficit. So proud to say that we have a balanced budget. We've made our pension payment. We paid off our $3 billion loan from the federal government during the pandemic. Our backlog of bills is down from, 5 years ago was 15 billion. We are now down to 3 billion. So we're turning the corner here, and it's gonna take some time. We need to make sure that we're funding the programs that help our people now, and not creating more programs. We have to look into what programs make sense to create moving forward. I'm not saying close the door on that completely, but every time we add new spending, we need to make sure that there's a revenue to pay for it. And that's, something that I think, a lot of us are committed to. So balanced budget, we took on a couple of other issues. I was sponsoring a couple big issues. What we're calling the Keep Youth Healthy and Safe Act. That's Senate Bill 818, essentially legislation that I worked with Planned Parenthood Equality Illinois on to ensure that we're teaching our youth age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate information as it relates to their health, as it relates to their safety. And it's legislation that really looks to be more inclusive. We heard from folks, LGBTQ youth in Southern Illinois that have been bullied, that don't understand who they are, don't understand why they're different, and to have a curriculum that's updated, that's appropriate, that's accurate, is going to foster inclusion. It's going to reduce discrimination. It's going to make people our youth feel belonged. And I think that's incredibly important, right? And look, there's going to be people out there that try to sorry. My wife needs her phone, and she gets what she needs. At least that's been my directive. And so, look, there's some people that are going to try to make this into something that it's not, right? They're trying to already spin. The Illinois Family Institute and others have already went out there and called me names and said that I'm trying to teach, sex to kindergartners. Look, the curriculum that we're trying to put forward, number one, a parent or guardian can opt out their student out. Number two, school districts have the final say over their curriculum and instructional materials. Number three, though, we put it in the language. We said, look, if you're a kindergartner or first grader or second grader, we want you to know what boundaries are, what your personal boundary is, who's a trusted adult, where it's safe to touch someone, who to report, issues to, right? Those are the types of pieces that we're trying to make sure you all know. And, I had this conversation with a constituent, why do you need to teach my kid about sexting? And I said to them, look, I hear where you're coming from, but the reality is in today's world, we cannot control the news. We cannot control the scandals. We cannot control the messages that come into our youth. And wouldn't, at least let me speak for myself, for my 2.5-year-old, when he grows up a little older, I want him to know what's appropriate and what's not, so he can tell me, he can tell my wife and say, look, I got an inappropriate message. I got this message. What do I do? You know, but he needs to know what is appropriate and what's not. And that's, you know, essentially where we came from with this legislation. Another piece of legislation that, you know, really is important to me is the Fix the Floyd to block illegal gun ownership legislation, Senate Bill 568. You know, I was able to secure 27 of my colleagues as co-sponsors on the original piece of legislation. And I was having conversations every day about this legislation that would, you know, ensure that there's $9 million in mental health funding to communities that are most impacted by gun violence. Make sure that the Illinois State Police have the resources it needs, to provide, to ensure that those who shouldn't have firearms don't. Make sure we're doing a universal background check, right, on folks, and mandate fingerprinting, right? Fingerprinting is the top way to do a background check. And so, you know, this is all, for those of you who don't know, this is all stems, well, in a lot of ways for decades of the gun violence that's happening, but especially after the last 2 years, more than 2 years ago in Aurora, there was a gunman that killed 5 people and wounded 6 others. And, you know, there's gun violence happening every day. There's that mass tragedy and what happened in Atlanta and Boulder and East St. Louis and Springfield and Chicago. But what happened in Aurora really started the process for this legislation, because Johns Hopkins University and Giffords Law Center got involved and said, look, the fingerprinting, this guy had a FOID card. He did the fingerprinting to expedite his CCL, concealed carry license. And because of that, the Illinois State Police, because they did the fingerprinting, the Illinois State Police found out that he had an aggravated assault charge from Mississippi in 2014. And they said, okay, we're going to revoke your FOID card now. Well, that was the first part of the equation. The second part of that equation was the guy turning in his firearms, or the Illinois State Police going out and getting his firearms. And unfortunately, that did not happen. And this guy had a revoked FOID card, and he went on to kill 5 people and wound 6 others. And so that's somewhat the genesis of this. And, you know, look, we tried to pass the bill as is, and there was just not the support in the Senate. And this is one of those moments where, you know, we look to progress. And so what happened, we passed the original bill, passed the House, House Bill 1091. However, it didn't come over. There was a procedural issue that took place, so it didn't come over to the Senate. So what we decided in the Senate was, let's negotiate and do what we can. And so essentially what we did was we kept the mental health funding for communities most impacted by gun violence. We made sure that there was a commitment to fund the Illinois State Police. There's 2.1 million FOID card holders. And so when the Illinois State Police says, hey, we don't have enough manpower or staff to and resources to check every person, we need to make sure that they have the funding to do so. We made sure that there's a federal background check, a universal background check. And then the last piece was the hang up, the fingerprinting. And essentially what we did was we said, look, if you have your fingerprints on file with the state already as a FOID card holder for another reason, whether you're a doctor or a janitor or business license, whatever you turn your fingerprints in for, we'll give the Illinois State Police the ability to access them with your permission. We'll also incentivize, whether it's through an expedition or your FOID card or whatever the case may be, if you do the fingerprinting. And so essentially we estimate that we'll get approximately 70%, 75% of fingerprints. Is it 100%? No. But is it a huge step forward from the current percentage, which is 5%? Absolutely. And you know, the Illinois State Police Director, the Coalition for Gun Violence Prevention, they all say, look, one more fingerprint will make it quicker for us to go through all 2.1 million FOID card holders. So that piece of legislation passed the Senate with 40 votes, even picked up one Republican, and is currently in the House for a waiting for a vote. And so, it's one of those reminders where, on one bill, Senate Bill 818, we were able to get it across the finish line in both chambers, and it's going to be going to the governor's desk. On the other bill, we're still working on it, and then the last piece of legislation I'll touch on that is actually coming up is the energy package that's being discussed. We're going to go back next Tuesday. I made sure staff promised me that it would be one day, so I could tell my wife I'll only be gone for one day. So I'm holding staff to that promise. But the reality is, it's going to be a big package. It's going to include, funding for the nuclear plants and coal plants in order for them to, be sustainable for X amount of years until 2035, essentially, before they have to completely transition. It's going to make astronomical investments in wind and solar and clean energy jobs. And it's going to have very strong ethics provisions and rate reform provisions as it relates to the utilities. And so we haven't seen the language yet. It's been negotiated. I mean, we're going on 2 years now that this has been negotiated. And so it's a tough issue. I don't want to give Exelon, more money than we have to. At the same time, it's part of the negotiation, and this is part of what we need to do in order to really get to a clean energy future. And so I'll have to look at the final language. I think we should all look at the final language. Please let me know what you think. But we're going down, we're going down. I've been down there so much long that I'm used to saying we're going up. But we're going down to Springfield next Tuesday, the Senate is, and the House is going in on Wednesday. So that's something that's coming up. And then finally, two pieces that I just saw on the flyer. The TEACH Act, requiring Asian American history be taught in schools, public schools. I was proud to sponsor that in the Senate. That was something very personal to me, and something that I see in our district every day. I'm proud of the district I represent. I think it's the most diverse district in the state. Most Jewish community members, Asian American members, Assyrian American. We have all the different faiths. I love it. I love our district, and having a 22% Asian American district, and hearing from the Asian American youth that have said, we just don't see ourselves, we don't know our history, we don't know who we are, to be able to deliver this, and it's to their credit, their activism and their ability to reach out to legislators, that really made this happen. And then lastly, as was mentioned, I'm the chair of transportation, and come here. If you're gonna cause all this ruckus, at least say hi. You say hi?
Hi.
Okay. All right. Go to mama. He's officially has more hair than I do, but that's another story. The last piece, and it's a big role that I have, is chair of transportation. And one piece of legislation I just want to highlight is House Bill 253. We passed a historic $45 billion capital plan in 2019, and there's a lot of questions as to where that money is going and how projects are funded and how they're prioritized. And when you read the statistics, it's a little heartbreaking, right? One statistic that always pops out at me is 95 out of the top 100, longest commutes in the Chicago area region are from Black and Latino communities. And when you think about that, you start to think about, well, So it's harder for them to get to their job. It's harder for them to get to their school. It's harder for them to get to their hospital. And we need to do something about that, and that's an equity issue. It's a transparency issue because we need to make sure we know how projects are funded and how they're being prioritized, but it's also an equity issue. And so that's some legislation that may not get as much fanfare as others, but it's something that's going to take a big step forward because there's a lot of projects. I mean, we're talking about there's $33.2 billion in funding for roads, bridges, and mass transit. And we need it because the American Society of Civil Engineers has given us a D- rating in our transportation infrastructure system as of 2019. I think we're at a C+ now over the last 2 years, which is better, but my mom would not be happy, is not happy still. And so it's one of those situations where we need to continue to work on it, and it's important. Transportation infrastructure is how we keep and bring more people here, how we keep and bring more businesses here. If we make things more accessible, more affordable, in order to get from point A to point B, more people are going to come here. So with that, I know I said I'd keep it short, but there's a lot that happened, so I felt like I had to talk about some of them. But I'm happy to take questions and talk about any issues that you all want to talk about.
Great. Well, thank you so much. No, you have a lot to tell us, and we want to hear it, so that's really good. Let's invite people. If you have comments or you have questions, you have a couple of ways. One thing that you can do is raise your hand using the emotic, what do they call it, the reactions. If you use the one that looks like applause, we can call on you and you can unmute yourself and speak. Another way is to put a message in chat. And you can either direct that to Paula and she'll read it anonymously, or you can just write it and we'll know. The other thing before you do that is I wanted to say there are some of you here that I don't recognize from other events, which is always exciting to have new people. If you did not get a personal invitation to this event on your email, if you would please send us an email at lincolnwoodtogether@gmail.com, lincolnwoodtogether@gmail.com, and we will add you to our list so that we can invite you to wonderful events like tonight. Sue Ginsburg has a question. Sue, do you want to unmute and speak for yourself?
Yes. Hi, Ram. I was present at the Equality Illinois Zoom that you had, so I've been lucky to listen to you twice in 1 month. My question to you, I guess I have 2 or 3, but my first question is, has there been a push to squash voting rights in Illinois, as there have been in 48 other states around the country?
Well, so far, the answer to that is no. Obviously, the Republicans, create a narrative that essentially anytime we look to expand voting rights, they paint the national, which is the national message of, there's voter fraud, right? And so fortunately, I think we're heading in the right direction as it relates to voting rights. We did pass Senate Bill 825, I believe. It was the elections omnibus legislation, which moved the primary date to June 20th, but also made Election Day as a holiday, allowed folks that have been rehabilitated to run for local office, and a number of other provisions that we can send you more information on. But I think we're going in the opposite direction. Now, obviously, we need to stay vigilant, and we also need to push the envelope, right? There's more that I think we can do. I believe, we should, at least put out a pilot program for ranked choice voting and see on a small scale if that is something that's palatable, right? We had the Chicago mayor's election, and wherever you stood on the mayor election in Chicago, you had 2 people going to the runoff that had, I think, 17 and 16% of the vote. And so maybe it would have been different if we had ranked choice. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's something we should look into. But we need to remain vigilant, Sue, because Susan, because the other reason is, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but there are some of the Supreme Court justices in Illinois, the Illinois Supreme Court justices that are up for their election in 2022, and we know what happened at the U.S. Supreme Court level, and so if there is a change in the mindset or the makeup of the Illinois Supreme Court, and there are lawsuits as it relates to voting rights legislation, then we're gonna have to deal with that. So we gotta remain vigilant, and we gotta push the envelope.
Thank you.
I know Sue has I know you have a few questions. Let's give.
Okay.
We have a bunch of people. Can I come back to you for your next one, or did you have a follow-up?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
I'll try to keep my answers shorter.
We want to hear everything you have to say. Edie, I believe you had a question. Go ahead. You have to. There you go.
I do. And thank you, Ram, for being able to make time for us. I really appreciate it. So one of the things that is most important to me is getting money out of politics. And doing that on a national level seems to be Herculean at this point. Is there any possibility that we could do that at a state level? And is there any movement to do that?
That's a great question. I think the conversations that I've had around voting rights and elections have been more in the category of how do we expand ballot access, how do we make it easier for people to vote, as opposed to campaign finance issues. The conversations that I've heard about I've had about campaign finance issues is more disclosures, given some of the ethical, issues that have come up over the last 3 years, and so that's one. The second is really, when we talk about campaign finance reform, getting the money out of politics, the immediate thought after that is public financing of campaigns. And, that's something that in the context of the state of Illinois' fiscal situation, people have paused over. However, I think, this is something that really needs to be brought up again. I think we've cleared a hurdle, Edie, in some ways, some of the conversations, some of the issues that were hard to get over the hump, get over the hump of Election Day as a holiday, expanding absentee ballot applications, expanding early voting, making sure we have curbside voting. Those items we did as a pilot for 2020, and there's really no reason to go back.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason someone can tell me like, oh, we shouldn't continue to make Election Day as a holiday. There's not, I don't think, at least as I look at it. And so with that being said, let's keep pushing the envelope and have the next conversation, right, around campaign finance reform. Hey, I would love it. I would love to just be able to not have to dial for dollars and spend 100% of my time. I say, people ask me what's the biggest challenge. I represent 217,000 people. 60,000 people voted in my 2018 general election. And they're like, what's your biggest challenge in this job? And I could talk about a number of things I got to go through and the sacrifices. But at the end of the day, my biggest challenge is I don't know what 157,000 people are thinking, because they didn't, at least if you vote, I have a sense of, okay, you're engaged at some level and you may be thinking X, Y, Z. But if you don't vote, it's hard for me to know. And so I would love to focus on talking to those 157,000 people as opposed to, dialing for dollars. So I would be supportive. I think it's we need to, this is the next wave. I think this should be part of the next wave of campaign and election related issues that we should push.
Is this something that you would be willing to propose and get sponsors for?
I think so. The only reason I say I think so is I'm always mindful that one of my colleagues might have introduced this legislation already. And so I just need to check, if I introduced like 6 different election bills in 2019, only to be told, yeah, like 3 of those that were introduced for the last 10 years by so-and-so. And so, you know, I just want to be mindful of that. But I'm happy to work on it with you all, and would definitely co-sponsor, if not sponsor.
I'm going to jump in with a question. What does that look like in real life? Work on that with you all, because I would love to be in that. If you want,
Yeah.
if you want another person, here's a person, not as part of, you know, not as Lincolnwood together, but what would I do?
Yeah. So, and now that I'm thinking about it, I believe Daniel Biss had legislation on this back when he was a state senator, where essentially you know, you would be able to raise, like, for every $100 you raise, 400 would be publicly financed if you chose to go the public finance. I got to look at the exact legislation. Excuse me. But look, we would take a piece of legislation like that. I would introduce it. Excuse me, or one of my colleagues who has already introduced it or wants to introduce it would introduce it, and we would organize around it, right? We would have constituents from each district reach out to their state senator and state rep and ask them, explain the issue, explain why it's important to you, explain why things would be different in your opinion, and ask them to co-sponsor, you know. And, you know, we work to get 30 co-sponsors in the Senate and 60 in the House. And then at that point, it's up to the Senate president and the speaker to you know, I mean, it has to go through the committee process, but then, you know, the Senate president and the speaker decides if it gets called for a vote or not. And so when we say work on it, it gets more challenging, right? Because, you know, it's easy for you all to reach out to me and say, hey, can you co-sponsor this? Because, you know, I would do it and you're my constituents. But we got to find people in Senator Fine's district, Senator Murphy's district, Senator Peters' district, Senator Morris's district, and the list goes on.
Yeah. So I think
Which there are people
Yeah.
that want the same thing.
I think Edie wants to make a final comment, and we'll move on to the next point.
Is it possible to put it on, make it a ballot initiative that people actually voted on? Because I think people would really like to get money out of politics. It's very few people who want it in.
Yeah, I think there might be a way. I know it would require petition signatures statewide to do it. I'd have to get back to you. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know that the city, Chicago, the Cook County, they're able to have referendums. Now there's a difference between a binding and non-binding referendum. So we'd have to look into that. I'll get back to you.
Why don't we move on to the next point? That I think that in the chat, the information there is there for how to reach the senator's office, and any individual who's interested in any of these topics. I think we're welcome to follow up. I found Senator to be extremely receptive. Sue, I know you're on. I know you've got a few questions. We have one from an anonymous person. So Sue, you want to ask yours, and then I'll ask the one in the chat.
Yes. You said that we already have 33.2, did you say billion dollars for transportation? So let's say, God willing, the federal government passes the infrastructure bill. Would that $33.2 billion mean we get less from the federal government, or would we get a regular allocation? Let's see, if we wanted to put, you know, the speed rail up between, I don't know, somewhere and somewhere.
Yeah, Chicago and St. Louis or
Milwaukee or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It certainly, I believe we would. The 33.2 billion is separate from whatever federal allocation we would get.
Oh, okay, good.
Now, because that 33.2 billion is part of the Rebuild Illinois Capital Plan that, and hope, you know, hopefully folks know this, but maybe they don't. Maybe gas prices has been just as good, but we did double the gas tax to fund that 33.2 billion, and so so that happened since 2019, And there was a little bit of concern when the pandemic started because driving folks weren't driving as much. The motor fuel tax would go down, but fortunately, it only went down for a couple months, April and May of 2020, and then it picked back up in June. And so it is important to acknowledge, yes, the 32.2 billion is state funding, is really funded by the motor fuel tax increase and license fees and so forth. To invest in our roads and bridges and infrastructure and transportation and mass transit and so forth. The federal package would be huge because one, it would allow us to invest in what I quote unquote call reach projects, right? Projects that maybe like a high-speed rail, right? Which, right now we're doing so much maintenance on our bridges and roads and mass transit that high-speed rail from Chicago to St. Louis is like, it would be nice, but right now we need to make sure this bridge is not a -2 and it goes up to like a like a 7, and so that'd be huge. But also I'll just say that, Illinois does not get our fair share of federal funding, right? We're fourth or fifth in dollars that go out to the federal government, and we're 46th in receiving them back. Now, part of it is we're a bigger state, right? And we 12.6 million people. And so, it's okay that, sometimes, our Wyoming will get some of our share and so forth, Montana, but we shouldn't be 46th. That is not a number, that's another statistic that we should not, be satisfied with. And so one of the two biggest ways to get federal dollars is transportation and our Medicaid. Medicaid is we get a 50% match, federal match from Medicaid. So that's, I'm hoping for our infrastructure and transportation bill because look, the reality is Illinois we're the middle of the Midwest, middle of the country. We have O'Hare, we have Midway, we have a rail system. We're the trucking routes. And so the federal government can't not invest in us because they need us for the logistics industry and you name it to work in this country. So anyways, long answer, short question, but it's separate, and I do hope that they can pull it together.
Okay, great, thanks.
There was a tag question on that one, Senator, that was, you mentioned that the sales tax on gas. There was a question of why are our sales and gas taxes so high? And does this phenomenon keep people from moving into the state or even force Illinoisans to leave? Your opinion about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the sales tax piece, we don't have a very broad base. So for example, Iowa has, they do a lot, they have a broader base of sales taxes. So what their level is of the sales tax is lower because they have a broader base. Illinois doesn't have that. And so, that's something that we have to consider. It's not, your concern about the sales and gas tax, it's real. That's quite honestly why I supported a fair tax, a graduated income tax initiative, because, instead of having all these different types of taxes, if we supported a graduated income tax structure where 97% of Illinois families would receive no tax increase or a small tax cut, we can start to first right our fiscal ship. Second, start to look at long-term how we reduce all of these other fees and fines and taxes. And so that's my opinion on that. Look, as far as people leaving the state of Illinois, it's a fact. Yes, we've gone from 12.8 million, I think, to 12.6 million. We're still the 6th largest state in the country. And we have to look at the factors. The Paul Simon Institute did a study on this, and I always point to our transportation and infrastructure system, our higher education institutions. If we can make sure that those are funded and we're providing affordable, accessible college and universities, think about it, right? If you're a kid in Edwardsville or Decatur, Illinois, and you go to school at Purdue University, the likelihood of you coming back to Edwardsville or Decatur is slim, right? And so on the other hand, though, if you go to Urbana or if you go to SIU or if you go to Illinois State, maybe you don't go back to your exact town. And I say that as an example because the population loss has been downstate and the south and west sides of Chicago. And there's a multitude of factors, right? But I think if we can keep our kids here, ensure that they go to school here, they are more likely to get a job here, get married here, raise their family here, and pay taxes here. That's how I look at it. We also look at the statistics of who is leaving, and it's the lower income folks. And I have a small story to say, which is my colleague, Senator Belt, who represents East St. Louis, downstate, he was telling me that people are leaving East St. Louis, our side in the state of Illinois, to move to St. Louis because the St. Louis minimum wage is higher than the East St. Louis minimum wage. Only temporarily, will be up to 15 in 2025. But if you're someone that is a working class person, you're looking for that opportunity, and that's what you would get. So there's a multitude of factors, but we need to reform our tax code. We need to right our fiscal ship, but we also need to make sure that we're investing in higher ed, investing in our transportation infrastructure to keep people here, keep businesses here.
Thank you for that. The next question was, it looks like 2 points. It's asked, what were the results of the census last year? Does Lincolnwood have any housing or school issues that were revealed?
So great question. In terms of the census, we have census estimates from the 2019 American Community Survey. We will not have the actual census data until I believe August of this year, and so we're waiting for that information. We have reason to believe that we did a phenomenal job in Illinois. As you all may know, the census effort is typically funded by the federal government. However, Illinois decided to put $29 million of state funding towards the census, just to make sure that we count every person we can. And so that's the funding that we put towards it in 2019. And, we went out and talked to everybody in every language and knocked on every door. So we feel confident about the numbers, but we're waiting to hear back. In terms of Lincolnwood and housing or school issues, that's a really good question. I have not heard any of those issues that have been reported to my office. I think generally speaking, in terms of the schooling issues, the question of when to open and reopen and what protocols to have, that's been a question mark that we've heard and we've received from folks, in terms of receiving guidance from the state, but also having enough, the Illinois State Board of Education, but also having enough independence to make decisions as a school board on their own. So that's something that we, continue to hear. We were able to stand up a vaccine drive with the Lincolnwood School District 74. So we're trying to do more hyper local vaccine events to help get the remaining percentage of folks that we need a vaccine. Affordable housing is an issue that I hear about in every part of my district. We passed a $100 million out of the ARPA funding. We put $100 million towards affordable housing, ranging from tax credits for landlords and to offer affordable housing, to other housing relief for tenants that may have been struggling during the pandemic. And so I'm happy to talk more about that as well.
Great, thank you for that. Sue, did you have another question? I don't want to, I said I'd come back to you. I've got a couple, no, you're good? Okay, all right, there's another question in chat, which was, can you explain the Mind Strong Act?
I'm not familiar
Clara,
with.
I think the question was from Clara. Clara, are you here? You need to unmute. You're still muted, Clara. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Saw it on your website, and you had talked about mobile crisis teams. That was mentioned on the website on your legislation about adult mobile crisis teams. And I don't know.
Okay. Let me.
I just want more clarification, or if, you know.
Let me circle back with
Yeah.
you on that. I don't have that information at the top of my mind.
Sure, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
So there's a question here that says, I am a recent grad of UIUC and am currently a transportation engineer that's worked on O'Hare right as I got out of school. Many of my classes focused on sustainability and resilience. I understand that green infrastructure is being prioritized at the federal level, but what is being done at the state level to incentivize IDOT and the tollway to make their projects more green?
Great question. So first and foremost, one of the biggest challenges that we have with transportation infrastructure is not necessarily the funding. It is the talent. The reality is there are a number, I would say in 100 range of engineering vacancies at IDOT. And so we're really struggling to fill those positions. I'm trying to work with Urbana-Champaign and IDOT to, bring them together and say, we can't have the fourth best engineering university in the country and have all these vacancies at IDOT. It just doesn't make sense. But so I want to thank whoever asked the question for the work that you're doing. So the first piece of that is we were able to insert in House Bill 253 the notion of environmental impact on projects that are performed. So in other words, as a project is materializing, they have to take in, so they had the typical factors of safety, congestion mitigation, those types of items. So what we did, we said we have to add, you have to add environmental impact, economic impact, equity, and a couple other factors. And so we really need, IDOT will have to include environmental impact as a factor. The other thing that we did was another bill, House Bill 270, I believe, provides that IDOT has to dedicate more funding to bike and pedestrian lanes. And so essentially what we did was we eliminated what was called the 80-20 requirement. If a municipality wanted to do a bike and pedestrian lane, they would have to, usually before this legislation hasn't been signed yet, but it will, knock on wood, they would have to come up with 20% of the project, and IDOT would come up with 80%. So we said, look, there's some municipalities that can't afford to do that, and so we said, we shouldn't have that be the hindrance that doesn't promote more environmentally conscious ways of transporting or transiting, or whatever the ing is there. And so we made a huge stride there to say, look, we want to prioritize a more environmentally friendly way to travel. And so those are a couple of the factors, but IDOT, for the tollway, for example, they are now required to have an electric charging station at each major toll plaza. And so it's a work in progress. but it is something that needs to be more and more at the center of how projects are formed. You know, another example, what type of asphalt we use, right? A more environmentally friendly asphalt. And people don't think about this stuff, but the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, they have a professor that has looked into all of this, you know, and is advising the state on how to move this forward, how to make sure we're utilizing materials that are more and more environmentally friendly and that are sustainable, right? Which means that economically, in the long run, it'll be better.
Excellent. Andrea, I think you've been really patient. Did you have a question for the senator? You're still, there
I
you go.
did.
Now
Thank
we-
you. Thanks, Karina. Thanks for having this event. Thanks, Senator Ram. The question I had is, I'm wondering if there's a mechanism to evaluate the cost benefit of state expenditures to see if it's possible to lower costs and get better results, thereby freeing up taxpayer money to use for other important purposes, such as like corrections. I'm kind of wondering, is the Illinois taxpayer getting a good deal on what we spend for corrections? Or can that money be spent in better ways that would free up money, get better results, free up money, and maybe be able to fund more education, like summer learning, especially with respect to the pandemic, all the children who are behind? Is there any organization in the state government that does that?
And when you say corrections, do you mean the Department of Corrections, or?
I guess I'm asking about the whole prison system and the whole public safety system. I mean, we hear that the United States has 5 times as many people incarcerated as other wealthy nations. So the question I have is, do we need that many people incarcerated? When they're incarcerated, obviously they're taxpayer users, right? Taxpayer money users. If they weren't incarcerated, but they got other kinds of supports, for example, potentially maybe they could be taxpayer generators and not cost the state as much. And then there would be more money freed up, because I know the state is in such a fiscal crisis. I'm wondering, are there ways that our money could be spent better, more wisely?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And if a legislator doesn't say absolutely to that, then they may not be giving you the right answer. Look, there's always ways we can improve efficiencies. And I use the word efficiencies not as a way to say we need to cut, but as a way to say we need to be smarter about how we use our resources. So first, let me just say, you know, there was an effort and is an effort to analyze, you know, what's been characterized as budgeting for results or performance-based planning, and so there's constantly conversations about, you know, how we're spending taxpayer dollars and is it working. We have in the Senate, we started a new process this year under Senate President Harman, where we have, instead of having just 2 appropriations committees, where all the departments come into those committee hearings and they present their budget, we have like 9 or so appropriations subcommittees, and each department has to come in and describe their budget, and we get into the weeds. You know, when you only have 2 committees and there's dozens of departments, you know, it kind of it's hard to go into the weeds. So we were able to do that, and I would encourage everybody, you know, when we start the budgeting process next year again, to tune in and to ask me to ask questions, right? You know, that's part of my job, right, is to ask your questions, and so, you know, I say all that to say that in terms of, and I'm glad you clarified in terms of where you're coming from. There's absolutely ways that we can improve, and so the criminal justice reform issue, the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus had 4 pillars. you know, work that they put together in lieu of what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery last year, and a lot of the social and economic justice issues that have happened over the last several years. And the criminal justice pillar, one of the key tenets of that pillar was ending cash bail. And ending cash bail, you know, people are like, well, how, you know, we got to keep our criminals, you know, incarcerated. Well, the problem isn't that we need to keep our criminals incarcerated. The problem is that we were keeping people incarcerated based on their ability to pay and not on their ability, not on their level of threat, right? Or their level of whatever you want to call it, to society. And so the perfect example that I give is, you know, Kyle Rittenhouse, right? He killed 2 people, and he had a $2 million bail, and people came together, and whoever, Proud Boys or some celebrity, they all came together and they paid the $2 million, right? Should he be on the streets? No, I don't think so. You know, even if I had a constituent tell me that, he acted in self-defense, even if that's the case, let's say I obviously disagree. I had to keep a straight face, but I disagreed. Even if that is the case, when someone just kills 2 people, I don't think that they should be, on the streets or let go, right? On the other hand, we have people that are incarcerated that are have to pay a $50,000 bail or a $10,000 bail that can't afford it, lose their job, lose their housing, and are now in a situation where they are now 2 times more likely to be reincarcerated, because that's the statistic. Once you're incarcerated, if you spend more than 3 days in jail, you're more likely to be, incarcerated again. And it's starting to, really create a situation where we have a member of society that's no longer able to contribute in a positive way. And that's not what we should be doing. That's not how we should not only not have that person be incarcerated because they're not a threat to society. We should be spending more resources on rehabilitating the others. And so again, this goes to the funding. So there's this whole defund the police and not fund the police conversation. And I tell people, look, someone can say we ended cash bail and that's defunding the police. Someone can also say that by me supporting funding for municipalities to ensure that their police officers have body cameras and are getting trained is funding the police, right? And so this is where we have to get into the weeds. And I know that there are phrases for a reason, but if you ask me, yeah, we should have ended cash bail. And if you ask me, should the village of Lincolnwood have funding to ensure that police officers have their body cameras and put training towards their put funding towards their training to make sure that they're trained properly on use of force and all the other items that we need them to be, then yes, the answer is yes. And so it is a complicated conversation, but you hit. I feel like I'm giving you a long answer again, but you hit it on the head, which is we have to. It's not a question of defunding or overfunding. It's a question of what are we funding and how do we fund it? How do we make sure it's achieving our goal?
That brings a question, and there's other
Thank
people
you.
there are other people who have questions, so I'm not gonna. I just want to make a comment. But that's what seems to me, Senator, to be like, we can talk about all of these issues, but like what you just said really strikes a chord of what are our core values? How are these decisions made? And when you say like, well, are we defunding or are we refunding or are we diverting funding? Or I think that I think I'm going to come see you sometime and talk and do that, because I don't want to take up the time from people who have questions. Let's go to Alicia. Alicia has a question.
Hi. Okay. So thanks for coming tonight, Senator Villivalam. I appreciate your time. and all of your work on all of these issues. I just wanted to piggyback on that last idea. Just so I live in Skokie. Karen lets me piggyback on the Lincolnwood topics all the time when we have common elected officials. But so Skokie has a whole police use of force policy review that's going on right now. And I just wanted to say that for the Safety Act, there's been so many points in reaching out to the community, or there's been points where just a commissioner had already anticipated topics that we were going to cover anyway. But a few times I've reached out to the community and they're like, oh, well, this was already covered by the Safety Act, so I don't have anything else to say. Or they'll have a few other things to say, but they're the things that the Safety Act addressed that they wanted outweighs the things that they still want. There is, so it's a very long bill. I haven't read it, but I have people, I'm on a commission that is reviewing the police force. The police use of force is just volunteer citizens in Skokie. And they've read it and they said that there's a part in it where people have to, there's going to be a standardization of use of force policies across the state, which I'm not sure if it'll undo all the work that we've done, but we're going to go forward anyway. But I don't know it's not clear what the timeline is going to be for that or who's going to do it. I don't know if you had more insight. It does have policy in the bill itself about how things are defined or what is allowed. Is that what that meant? Do you know, it's just one part of an enormous multi-100-page bill. Do you know what I'm talking about? Maybe
I vaguely remember this discussion. It was in January and it was a large piece of legislation. I'd have to look at the specific piece that you're referencing. What I will say, Alicia, though, is that generally speaking, we at the state, we set floors. So we say, you can't go below this, right? And the reason for that is, there are some municipalities that are not as forward thinking and in different parts of the state, right? And there are some municipalities that don't have an organized group of activists who understand the policy and are willing to and have the time to and have all the resources to fight for it. And so that's why I believe we standardize that across the state. However, so for example, the minimum wage, the floor is going to be 15 in 2025. If a municipality wants to make it higher, if they're a home rule municipality, they can, and so that is my general thought on that. But let's definitely circle back. It's been 5 months since I voted on it, but I can dig deep into it with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Thanks, Alicia. I think we have a question from Edie, and then there's another question. Edie, go ahead.
So figuratively, not literally speaking, what keeps you up at night?
That's a good question. I was going to say, you said figuratively, I was going to say my toddler. But I think it is this notion that, I don't know that it's how do you reach the people that one, that are just not engaged civically, and two, that in some ways, more importantly, that have barriers, whether it's language or digital or otherwise, that just don't know, that don't know what is there to help them, right? We passed legislation last year that allowed undocumented seniors to enroll in Medicaid. you know, and at the state level. We're the first state, I think, in the country to do it. And the reason for that is, hey, look, you know, we need comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level. We need it now. And however, as long as that doesn't happen, the you know, undocumented immigrants are they're people here, they work here, they pay taxes here, they're members of our society, and you know, should they need Medicaid, you know, by the way, again, Medicaid is a 50% federal match. You know, they should be allowed to have it and get the healthcare coverage that they need. That being said, I don't know if my concern there is right is how is that message getting through to those that need it, you know? And so that's what keeps me up at night is you know, uh, you know, it's what we say about the vaccine right now. Everyone that wants to get the vaccine, wanted to get the vaccine, has gotten the vaccine, right? There's no, like, there's not really, like, if you want it by now, you can get it, right? It's the people that, you know, are hesitant, or people that maybe don't know and need that language assistance, or need that guidance, or whatever it is. You know, and that's what keeps me up is how do you help those folks? You know, we have 1,000 Rohingyan families in our district on Devon Avenue, and they came here to escape a genocide in Myanmar that's still happening, essentially. And how do I help them, right? How do we help make sure that they're able to, you know, get on their feet here and know that, you know, there's resources for them, and there's English as a second language classes, and so many other things. So that's what keeps me up at night, because no matter how many people we help, there's more people to help. And the question is, you know, how can we get to them and make sure they get the help they need?
We have similar concerns, Senator, because, you know, in Lincolnwood, we have 12,000 people, and we have 20 something that are with us tonight with the, I mean, who has the opportunity to talk to their senator, and getting people to come and listen and talk and ask questions. So I think that there's some interface there. I think
Absolutely.
another topic. There's a question for how can we remove guns from the state? Buyback? What's your opinion about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, you know, it's a multi-step process. You know, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, we passed the Gun Dealer Licensing Act, which required gun dealers to do a background check, required them to go through a process to ensure that they're not illegally selling a firearm. Now we're working on Fix the FOIA to block illegal gun ownership. That's another step. We need to, you know, to deal with assault weapons, and you know, make sure that, you know, because I was going to introduce that legislation to ban assault weapons, but because I had this other legislation, you know, the gun lobby, I think, would have used banning assault weapons to try to stop this other legislation. So one of my colleagues introduced that legislation, but we need to come back and look at that. But then we also need to invest in the holistic solution of schools. I mean, we Andy Minar finally in 2018 was able to reform the way we fund education. And the way we funded education until 2018 was based on your property taxes. Well, on the south and west side of Chicago, where a lot of gun violence happens, the property values and the property taxes are not at the level that we need to properly fund the schools that are there. And so the evidence-based funding formula changed it such that we're funding it based on the need of the pupil and not where you live, right? And so that is you know, a big step in the right direction, and that's how we're moving it forward. So that's one piece, right? We need to make sure that there are jobs in those areas, right? There's pharmacy deserts, there's food deserts, there's grocery deserts in those areas, and that makes it all the more challenging. And so I say all that to say, you know, at some point, right, at some point, we can, you know, fix the void, we can ban assault weapons, we can, you know, ensure that gun dealers are requiring a background check. But at some point, when we talk about mass tragedies, maybe there will be a day where we don't have the Atlantas and the Boulders and the Auroras or the Sandy Hooks. But if you really want, not if you really want, but if you're really looking, right, mass tragedies happen every weekend on the south and west side of Chicago. And so at some point, you know, we need to address it in a holistic way.
I just want to, is it okay? I just want to share a quote with you from my rabbi. And my rabbi says the government is society's way of showing how much we care.
That's right.
And I wish that that's what I would like to see. I would like to see more government like you. I would like to see more caring. There's a lot of applause going on. I see out across the screen, and I see comments in the chat. I don't know if you've been able to talk and read at the same time. That's a challenge.
Thank you.
But it says, thanks to Ram for his time and efforts to make Illinois better for all of us. Thanks to the organizers, and thank you to the organizers in Lincolnwood Together, and to Ram for bringing us all together. This was really positive to hear from everyone. A wonderful session. Thanks to Ram and Lincolnwood Together. Let's do this regularly. Lots of thank you Rams. I won't read them all to you.
I should have had my wife sit here for a minute.
We're recording. You can just put that last little 5 seconds there and put it on it for me.
I'm not sure it would have helped, but you know, maybe we could have tried.
Well,
I have a lot of making up to do.
I think I was just going to say, I think I appreciate her and appreciate your son because they share you with us, and for you, the kind of schedule that you keep and the amount of constituents that you talk to, they're making a huge sacrifice as well. Before we say goodnight to you, I just want to make, Paula, do you want to do it, or you want me to say? Paula says you go right ahead. Want to make one more plug for Lincolnwood Together. Lincolnwood, unlike Skokie, for example, does not have an angel fund, does not have, through the government, does not have a way to help residents in need. We go to the township or the state, but not in Lincolnwood. And Lincolnwood Together started the Harris Levitt Memorial Angel Fund. We are residents helping residents. Paul has put the link in the chat. We would be very grateful for anybody who makes a donation. It's a 501c3, and it's our way of neighbors helping neighbors in financial crisis. That's how we show that we care. Senator, thank you so much. I see that your information is now in the chat as well. Your phone number, 872-208-5188. Or we can message at www.senatorround.com, contact-us. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming when you were a candidate. Thank you for being with us here tonight, and thank you for representing us. I see a lot of applause on the screen. I'll put my little reaction. It's an honor. It's an honor to be able to talk with you and to have representation that we trust and that we know cares about us. So thank you very much. And I want to offer myself, if you have an initiative about getting money out of politics, I'm in. I'm all in. So
yeah, we should look up, Joey and I will follow up. We'll look up Daniel Biss. Now that I think about it, I think 2 years ago he introduced, or 3 years ago he introduced legislation on campaign finance reform. So let's look it up and see where it is, and go from there.
Sounds great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this conversation, and please don't hesitate to reach out to my office or if I can be of any assistance. And in terms of the conversation we had tonight, please tell a friend, a neighbor, family member, whoever lives in the area, that they can do the same. They can reach out to me, and we'll do our best to help.
Awesome. And we're recording, so this will go up on our website, and people who weren't able to be here tonight will be able to attend. Thanks, Perfect. Senator. Thank you. And thanks, Joey. Thanks, Joey, for making this happen. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Night. Thank you.